All right, mates, welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody's doing well. Getting through this cold. Let me tell you what, weather's starting to turn again. Hopefully we'll get some warm weather, but we're going to talk Tidal, Potomac. If you haven't seen the first breakdown series of Tidal Potomac, where we covered the D.C. area all the way to the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, which is this bridge. Let me get this out of the way. It was this bridge right here, okay, otherwise known as the 495 Woodrow Wilson Bridge going from crossing the Potomac, sorry. And we talked about this complex here with regard to Smoots Bay and the spoils on the other side. We've covered that in that video, predominantly well-known areas for a lot of people. But we're going to cover now because we've got a couple events coming out that have the 495 bridge as the cutoff, okay? Now, if you are someone in a kayak fishing club series, or you're familiar with the national series such as kayak bass fishing, I personally would encourage you to contact Chad Hoover in the future. If KBF plans to come back to the Potomac, they've come for a couple years, to move that boundary higher to the 14th Street Bridge. 14th Street Bridge Complex in DC. Just my opinion, especially if you're coming before May, okay? That is just my opinion, because you've got all that warm water runoff that we talked about in the previous two videos. Remember, in this series, we're going to break down the map, and then the companion part B will be the nautical map. So you can see the contours, you can see the depths, you can see all that of these different areas we're talking about. So you can just familiarize yourself with the Potomac. It is a massive, massive fishery, okay? And when MLF and Bass come here, they're running, okay? They're running and gunning on this fishery. Most of the time, events are held out of Smallwood, Marlboro, Maryland, okay, down in Mattawoman, and those boats will run all the way up into D.C., okay? And then you've got local events, regional events, and some other trail events at MLF, maybe BFLs that may launch sometimes out of Leesylvania, which is in the Virginia side, which I'll get to here in a second. And then they run up. So you're either running north, south, or, the opposite direction from your launch. If you're launching from Smallwood, a lot of guys will run over to the Virginia Creeks. If you're launching from Leesylvania, guys will run over to Mattawoman, okay? It's just how it is, and they're running and gunning those events. And if you're a kayak-centric angler, so much of your experience is going to be predicated on, unfortunately, boater information. Because their ability to run and gun in these areas, that your kayak, even if you are a motorized kayak, at the top Torpedo, Newport echelon, okay, you're not going to be able to cover from the main launches most of the areas that you're going to want to hit that are holding bass. Most of the people are going to launch in Mattawoman, at Slavin's Dock or Smallwood, and stay in that creek, right? Most of are going to launch from Leesylvania. There's a kayak launch ramp to the southern point below Leesylvania's boat ramp, and stay in Powell's Creek, right? Because that's what they're going to, because it's such a mass fishery in terms of opportunities. Kayakers tend to be limited really by their research and what they do before they hit that water in terms of where they're going to launch from, and know their capabilities and know their equipment capabilities, right? You do not want to be caught in the main channel in bad weather on the Potomac River. If you're looking at that weather and you're seeing wind and you're still going to hold your event, we got an event this weekend, okay, coming up this weekend, all right, where they're already looking at the weather, okay, and going to make a determination as to whether or not that event's going to be go down because of the wind component, okay? We're supposed to get high winds coming in at the end of this week, heading into the weekend. And that can be very, very dangerous. So you need to understand, if you're in a kayak, and it does not matter, but the river does not care what brand of kayak you're running. It is vicious and it is unforgiving. And if you get caught out in that main channel, You can face 3 and 4 footers easy, okay, out of nowhere. And so that's where you want to look at this, and you want to look at this series in terms of opportunities to where you can get into a ramp, into a creek, predominantly if the weather is that way, where you're protected by a lot of the trees on the side. Because you're in the creek, you're not really going to be as, impacted by those winds and the rain that can come in. It's just a backup plan that you want to utilize if you are kayak fishing, because you don't have that ability to get in and out. When water starts rising quickly or a storm moves in, you do not have that ability to freaking run and gun away and power through most kayakers, okay? And you're going to have to seek, there's no place to seek shelter, mates, if you get caught out there, okay? Like I said, it's just a dangerous, but the bite can be in the channel sometimes. So if you got great weather, don't overlook the channel, especially in pre-spawn where the bass have not moved into the mouth of the creeks yet. They've not moved into the creeks at all yet. All of that stuff. It's still early, early spring, okay? And the weather's going to dictate a lot of that, and most of them are going to be hanging out, in areas like I covered in the first video of some areas and some points here. So let's look at what we got rolling here at the 495 Woodrow Wilson Bridge area, which is the National Harbor, like I talked about. You've got Smoots down here. Bellhaven. You've got the run-on that comes in right here. This is a really great spot right here by Jones Point Park that a lot of guys hit as this comes in here to the river. People also hit the bridges a lot here for obvious reasons. And then in here, which I covered in the other video, the National Harbor. This is a pretty big area, okay? To also remember that when we're looking at this, sets up really well for boaters, and a lot of kayakers don't really go into these areas, especially for tournaments, because of the length of time it takes them to get there from a specific designated ramp. And remember, the new rules this year for a lot of kayak trails, which follow KBF, is designated ramps. So there may be ramps that are available, but they're not on your designated list for competition, so you cannot use them. So it's up to you to make sure that the ramp you're going to use is on the designated list. And again, most events, I checked out the event for this weekend. They pretty much have about a dozen ramps from 495 down to Nanjaboy Creek available. But that is by no means the only ramp, so you want to make sure of that. Into the Bellhaven area, you got a Bellhaven Marina. There's a actual sailing marina, sailing school there. And a really interesting place that a lot of people sleep on, that you shouldn't sleep on. I've got a video that's going to come out here from the actual refuge. Is below Bellhaven, the Dyke Marsh Wildlife Preserve. Okay, in through here, and you can Google that, and you can take a look at what I'm talking about. In terms of it is a protected wildlife preserve, but you are allowed to kayak in. There's no launches like boat launches and boaters and motorized, all that kind of things. There's a couple areas you want to make sure. I'll highlight, I think. I might do specific videos for that, because there are a couple areas like in Featherstone, which is a little further down, and Dyke Marsh, that you're not going to be able to, Occoquan Bay, below that, you're not going to be able to run your motor, even if you're on a kayak, okay? It's kayak canoe only, non-motorized. So you want to make sure that you take a look at that area when you're out on the water and understand on your phone where you are. Because there are a few areas, not a lot, a few areas where you're not able to run your motor, okay? And I'm not sure whether or not you can have the motor on your kayak and just not in operation or not. That's something I'll have to check out and get back and put in the description as an amendum. But Dyke Marsh Preserve area here, it's a beautiful, beautiful area. You can get back all up in... See how much this is going to highlight it. Okay, all up in here. It's really great. Like I said before, you can come down from Belhaven Marina, launch. It's got a launch. There is a launch fee. A lot of these, there is a launch fees, okay? Talked about that before in the previous video. There are a lot of public but paid public launches as well as state and county launches that don't have fees. Some of them are honor-based. Some of them are person on site. You always want to make sure what the opening times are. A lot of the state parks, mates, do not open until 9 a.m. They are not sunrise to sunset. A lot of the regional parks are sunrise to sunset because they don't have a gate that's, necessarily the ranger or whatever unlocks just the gate, and you can go down to the ramp. And it really, a lot of times you'll see that sometimes where tons are backed up at some of these spots, especially late spring, summertime. So you want to make sure that you are identifying that as well in terms of what the times are. But again, most state parks are like not 8:30, 9 a.m. And so if your tournament, per se, has a launch time of 6 a.m., 6:30, or lines in at 6:30 or something like that, you might have to make other plans. You might have to eat that, go out and have an extended breakfast because you don't want to be showing up at one of these spots at 6 o'clock only to learn that it's not opening for 2 hours, 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning. So just keep that in mind. So you've got these areas here, Potomac Park on the other side. A lot of people like to play off the bluff points, in terms of that. You've got some, obviously, great fishing spots off of Belhaven. A lot of deeper water that you will see videos that people talk about. Just like you'll see the warm water runoff videos from Blue Plains up in D.C. Tons of videos. You can check that out on YouTube. Just type in Blue Plains or Potomac River Fishing D.C., something like that. And then in through this island area, it's always a great spot. It's always a great place to kayak and to fish. And so you work your way down here to Hog. It's another prominent area here below Dyke Marsh. Again, that's the Virginia side. Licenses reciprocate, Maryland and Virginia, just so you know that, on the Potomac River. And you've got Broad Creek on this side of the river in Maryland, okay? A lot of people sleep on this area. And there's probably some justification for that over the years because it seems to be like this. It's on for a year or two and off for a year or two. On for a year or two, off for a year or two. So a lot of that. Ninja Boy is a lot like that down in the South where it's just a really weird dynamic, that happens as opposed to some of the other creeks like Powell's we'll talk about in another video. It's further down. The Virginia creeks and then Mattawoman that seem to be the go-to spots every year. But that does not mean that you shouldn't spend a little bit of time exploring in the other creeks because sometimes that's where they get that. It's just on higher rates, catch rates than previous years. And, a lot of people keep that to themselves during the season when they see that those things happen. So coming straight down here again, you've got Swan Creek, the second creek. So you've got Broad from National Harbor, then you've got Broad, then you've got Swan Creek, Hatton Point's a popular point. You will see guys sitting in and in this area a lot. And then guys will make the run back up into Swan, and then on the other side, on Virginia coming straight down, and then you get down towards Fort Hunt Park area, and the river begins to make a break. It makes a turn. Fort Washington, the lighthouses. There's a cool area, okay, Fort Washington, for historical purposes. It's just great to be out on the water to see that. The old batteries, the protected D.C., you got Fort Hunt Park on the Virginia side, and Fort Washington on the other side. It's basically to protect the city from, fleets coming up towards DC. It's just a really, really great spot. Again, massive water here, mates. Okay, in terms of it's on a map, it may look like it's but it's when you get out there, it's a ton of water. And so keep that in mind. You've got Piscataway Creek. the next creek down, and you've got entry into this creek as for your boat or kayak as well. It's a popular creek. Piscataway is a popular creek. It's not as much, more locals, like a lot of locals. And you can see here just by looking at this creek what I'm talking about. Okay, Farmington Landing, the marina, Fort Washington Marina. We'll take a look at that on satellite view. You can kind of get an idea what I'm talking about. Okay, so you've got the marina here, Farmington Landing, Calvert Manor Park. A lot of this probably is the one creek for me that reminds me a lot of the Upper Bay Tribs, like Sassafras and places like that. Just because of the shaping that you get in the creek and the opportunities of secondary points and points, as well as shallower water. And you can kind of see that here on this. And you got Mockley Point going out. But see what I'm saying about all these different points, secondary points. You've also got marina size, long marina docks here to play in terms of kind of like adjacent outside. You'll find them also holding in 15, 8 to 15, depending on what's happening with the water, all in through here before they move. Obviously, to me, from a local side, locals talk to me a lot about this creek and a few others as opposed to Matawan, because Matawan's pressured. It is a pressured. That's where the tournaments are. It is a pressured creek, no doubt about it. And so you've got to, want to keep that in mind, especially when you're out pre-fishing or trying to explore new water. This is what you got. Okay, now in terms of this, we're heading towards good old George Washington's home. Okay, Bryan's Cove, things like that. The actual banks and all that tends to change. Okay, the dynamics here tends to change when you come down through this area in terms of banks and things like that, steeper bluffs. You've got, if you've ever been to Mount Vernon, you're up way above the water. Okay. That's the beauty of Mount Vernon, and why that was probably picked, way back in the day, because it overlooks all of that. You've got the overlook too down here, 400 Park area as well. These are all great places too to go on your off day if you got family coming down as well. If you're fishing for a weekend or you're coming down to fish a BFL event or Toyota Series event or as a co-angler or an MLF event as a co-angler or an MLF event as a boater and or a co-angler on the BFL side. Or if you're coming to fish a kayak tournament and you're coming from out of town and you're coming for the 4 or 5 days, for 3 days of pre-fishing, 2 days of pre-fishing before your event. These are just kind of things you could do in your downtime, after 4, 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock if you're done pre-fishing. And again, you can kind of just tell here what we're talking about, okay? Again, these are longer runs, okay? And you've got George Washington's Mount Vernon, all that in here. And then this is where you predominantly begin to start to see docks on the main river, okay? You've had marinas, okay, throughout this section, okay? But you see how that's not really much, right, in a lot of these areas? This is when you begin. You've got a few up here from the yacht, because of the yacht. You've got a few up here, okay? But down here is where you start to begin to see them on the Virginia side, okay? We're all right in through here, okay? You got Dog Creek. Dog's actually Dog. I mean, depending on who you talk about, it's Dog Creek. It's named after the Indian tribe that were basically called the Dog Tribe. And if you notice that when you come here, clearly Potomac, almost all the creeks on the Maryland side, in most of the area in and around the Potomac, all have Piscataway as an Indian, tribal Indian name. Mattawoman, obviously. Nanjaboy, obviously. You're going to get that, okay? Because this was all part of, Algonquin and different confederacies and different tribes when we first arrived. So it's just an interesting point. So Doe Creek, you know what I'm talking about. Look at the massive amounts. Okay, and this is where it starts. All right, you got Fort Belvoir Army Base, and then Marshall Hall. I really like Marshall Hall. Marshall Hall is probably, in my opinion, one of the most underutilized bass fishing. Okay, launch ramps. Okay, just based on what I've seen. Now, a lot of other boats launch from Marshall Hall because it's deep, deep water all right in here. Okay, and so family boats, people just boats, being out on the water, non-fishing related. Okay, but in terms of bass boats, this really gets you a really great spot that most people, again, are launching either all up north or they're launching down at Smallwood or at Leesylvania on the Virginia side. And this is a nice, like, intermediate ramp that can get you to this section, can get you off Chapman's Point, okay, and into beyond Mockley Point into Piscataway pretty quickly, right? Hitting Fort Washington. Okay, so just keep that in mind if you're a boater, or if you're local and you've never used that ramp. It's just kind of like, it's not, you can get in and out pretty easily, like I said. You will deal with a lot more of the pleasure boat. But once you get beyond that, get out on the water and you're making your move, you're going to be fine. And again, this is where you'll see, again, a lot more of docks, bays, which I call bays, okay? Some people call them coves, like Belmont Bay, things like that further down. Belmont's going to be right below here. And I will probably cut it here for this section and then go from Mason Neck State Park, Belmont Bay, down the Virginia side in the next video. But you've got Pohick Bay Regional Park in here. You've got some great water coming in here, great grass, pads, mats. You've got all that. And again, all that is predicated and depends on the time of year you're coming, as well as what's going to happen with the weather. We've had a mild winter, so it's going to be interesting to see how fast the grass comes back in. I anticipate a very, very good grass year based on the momentum we've been seeing in a lot of these creeks. Even some of the creeks, mates, and I'll cover this in a grass video, that the last few years have been down. I think talking to some biologists, I think that some of these creeks, they've been pressured a lot less because the fishing hasn't been as good the last couple of years, because the grass hasn't been as good. But when you stop pressuring those creeks with all kinds of watercraft and all kinds of things like that, the grass is beginning to come back. And so we will see whether the bass move into those creeks or not in 2023. That's what the big question is going to be for a lot of those creeks. So that gives you this area. Obviously, it's a pretty big area. The regional park is run regionally, and it's not a state. It's not a state park. The regional park does have a launch fee. That launch fee, I think, is predicated on your license. It's an honor one, but if you're out of state or non-resident, I don't know if it's non-resident to Fairfax, Woodbridge kind of thing, or non-resident to Virginia. I'll check that out too. But either way, it's two different fees. So if you don't live in Virginia or you don't live in the county, you're going to be paying the out non-resident fee, which is like $11 or $13 to launch at that. And then you've got the state park, which I'll cover in the next video, is on the other side right here, Mason Neck State Park, which this deserves a lot of coverage and breakdown. And they're pretty close to one another, drive-wise, if you're going to hit two. I know a lot of people hit two. We'll hit them both in a day, especially kayakers. And that's it. So that's that section. This section here, we're going to stop it right here because that next section has a lot of areas. Not only a lot of ramps, but a lot of prime areas known for bass fishing and such that we will want to cover. But that gives you an idea of that next section down from the 495 bridge. Okay? So that takes you from here, Pohick Bay, around in here, either launching here, launching at Marshall Hall, okay? Piscataway, Swan, Piscataway, sorry. Broad Creek, Smoots, National Harbor. You've got Bryan's Cove, George Washington. I call it Bryan's. I think there might be another Bryan's as well. But you got George Washington, Mount Vernon, the docks, the in and around Dog Creek, okay, in through there. And then obviously you've got Cameron Run, Little Hunting Creek, I guess. Those kind of things that you've got in and around that bridge complex that you want to check out. And so that's just the second section. Make sure you take a look at part 1A, 1B, which is everything north of 495 to like the mall area or 14th Street Bridge Complex, okay, where the largemouths stop for the most part, and you start to get into smallmouths. And so this was 495 down to Pohick Bay, and then the next one will be a massive one. We'll cover all that in and out areas, Mattawoman, all the creeks, Powell's Creek, Leesylvania Lance, Belmont Bay, Potomac Creek, Quantico, all that stuff that's down, that's above the turn as you go down towards the deeper towards the 301 bridge all the way down. So that's really it, mates. Again, if you have any questions at all about a ramp, about a launch, about an area, specific creek, any of these things, please do not hesitate to message me. You can find me at JL Scott Fishing and Eats on Facebook and just Facebook message me. You could text me, obviously, use the number. And I'll be more than happy to share anything, any and everything that I have, in my tool shed in terms of baits, in terms of arsenal, things that I've been successful with, things I have not been as successful with. Whatever it is, I'm willing to share everything, my knowledge of growing up in Virginia, lived in Virginia for, 95% of my life outside of the military. And then currently, for over 45 years. Okay. Potomac River obviously is one of the primary fisheries along with the James River, because I grew up in Northern Virginia and then I moved to Richmond when I was 12. And so, but I still fished the Potomac, and I, at 12 to, adulthood, primarily fished the James River as well. So both tidal fisheries, a lot of the techniques work in both. One has a little bit more grass. The bass behave a little bit different in the tidal James than in the tidal Potomac. So anytime you want to discuss any of those things, always available. If you're on the James River, don't sleep on the frog. Potomac, not as much. Just saying. Just a couple tips. Other ways to avoid the stripers, and things like that. And so, and the catfish. But I'm hoping this series is at least is a starting point for you. This is part of the Unlock 2023, because I get inundated a lot with a lot of questions now. There are a lot of people. I try to get back to each and every one. Please forgive me if I've not gotten back to any on email or any of those things as of yet, but I will. The channel has grown tremendously in the last year. I think we're up above 22,000, 23,000 subscribers on YouTube, 4,000 subscribers on TikTok, 1,500 on Facebook. Facebook is probably the better medium if you have questions, because I'm on Facebook and I'm posting on Facebook every day. And so I can get your message and see your message pretty quickly and then get the information to you, compile it, and then get it to you. Also have, if you're in the smallmouth fishing, we've got the Smallmouth Army chasing smallies for the upper Potomac, as well as the Allegheny, the Susquehanna, the Monocacy, and other rivers that are really, really smalley-centric. So if you're interested in that, you want to get that newsletter. It's free. It comes to your email box, as well as the Facebook group Smallmouth Army. Hope everybody has a great day. Be on the lookout for the second part 2B to this video. All right, mates.